So this is the kind of area that he needs to be really running up the votes, and the Democrats will be heartened that there's a lot of early voting. But as I found when I began to speak to people, that's perhaps not the whole story.
So, David, Kamala Harris is in Atlanta today visiting a historic black college, and you recently, well, this week, spent several days in Georgia. What did it tell you about the election and who potentially might win it?
Yeah, Jane, I went to Georgia, and in particular the suburbs surrounding Atlanta, because in 2020, that's really where the election was won and lost. And Joe Biden ran up the votes he needed to swing Georgia for the first time since Bill Clinton for the Democrats. And I wanted to find out what the mood was out there in the Atlanta suburbs. And what I found was um, both Democrats and Republicans are rather bullish, and they are campaigning like crazy. They're handing out yard signs and other swag to activists and running phone banks and all of the campaign events you might expect on the ground. But when I really got to talk to them, I found actually a bit of nervousness among the Democrats. And that's because while Harris has excited much of the base, much more so than Biden was, they are finding that parts of the Democrat coalition, and it's really quite a large and diverse coalition who vote Democrat, especially in Georgia, which is a very large and diverse state, but nationally as well. And they are finding indications that Muslim voters are not keen on turning out for Harris as part of the administration because they don't like Biden's super strong support for Israel. Also, some younger black male voters. The polling tells us that Trump is making inroads and attracting more of them. And just anecdotally, just talking to a few younger black guys who I randomly bumped into, most of them were for Trump, and it was kind of it defied my expectations slightly because Biden had such a huge proportion of the black vote in Georgia, which was also very, very important to his win in 2020.
Mm. Do you think that could be decisive, that black vote in Georgia and also nationally?
Well, Georgia has, I think, the third largest proportion of black voters. It has a very large black population of any state, and I do think that this could make a decisive difference because just look at the figures in Georgia. It was decided by the smallest margin of any state last time,
Mm.
so less than 12,000 votes out of 5 million. That was 0.23%. It's a really, really tiny margin. And in other words, it's very finely balanced. And since then, we've had two Democratic senators elected in 2021, and then the Republican governor was
Mm.
quite easily re-elected in 2022. So
Mm.
it's what we call a purple state. It's neither red nor blue. It's somewhere in the middle. We can't quite work out exactly where it's going. The Democrats are convinced that it's heading in their direction because the population is growing with a lot of well-educated, younger newcomers coming from all over America, more expensive states to work in tech and logistics and even manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing. That Georgia and especially the Atlanta area is a growth area in America, and the people who are arriving are leaning Democrat. However, it's been historically rather Republican since Clinton last won the presidential in 1992, and Barack Obama excited the activists, but he failed to win Georgia both times that he ran there. So I just had the feeling that, especially when I spoke to in depth to Democrat campaigners and also to some Republicans, because I went to a Trump event and they had the wind in their sails, I have to say.
Mm.
Although I would caveat it again, that the Trump event in one of these suburban counties around Atlanta was mainly white people, which is unusual in a Georgia, in that kind of area around Atlanta, which is very diverse.
Mm.
It's majority minority around
Um,
there.
on the subject of Obama, David, I mean, he made
Mm.
a speech this week, or recently anyway, in Pittsburgh. How did that go down? I mean, someone did say that sounded like he was berating black men for even considering Trump.
Well, actually, I did speak with a black guy at the Trump event about this, and okay, he's a Trump supporter, but he did not like the way that Obama was saying in his speech in Pittsburgh, you've got a candidate who knows your experience, who lived your experience, who knows you. And this guy said to me, Kamala Harris doesn't know me. She grew up in Canada. She didn't grow up in the kind of neighborhoods I grew up in. And it's true that Harris spent most of her teenage years in Canada. Um, and he was not moved at all. In fact, he was rather annoyed at the way that Obama phrased it. Like
Mm.
his actual words to me were like, they're trying to tell us that the Democrat Party owns black people, like we can't think for ourselves. So he was put off by this, and I have to say, just randomly, like speaking to the guy in Office World, you know, when I was going to buy a notebook, the black guy serving there, who was about 30, and he said he'd just voted. The early voting has just started in Georgia. He'd just voted for Trump, and he'd voted for him because of the cost of living has gone up so much
Mm.
under Biden. He said he didn't vote last time. He's not really into politics, but this time he's voted for Trump because prices went up so much under Biden.
Yeah, I think that's very real for most people in the US, and anyone who's been there recently will know that's the case. Just going back to what you were saying at the beginning about Israel and some Muslim voters turning to Trump because of Biden's stance on Israel. Kamala Harris made a very, very clear point this week that she will be her own president if she is elected and not following Biden's sort of political regime. Do you think that will make any difference among those voters?
Well, just to be clear on that, Jane, what I found was the Muslim voters were just going to take a pass on the presidential. They weren't going to vote for
Right.
either Harris or Trump. They don't like either of them. They're too strongly for Israel, both of them. And you know, you get a great big long election paper in America with all of the offices that are up, um, and you know, you can leave off. You know, you can obviously leave off the presidential vote if you want to. So that was what was told to me when I was out there
Interesting.
in the Atlanta suburbs. But I think that Harris has, and this is the case with her with a few things. She's tried to distance herself from the Biden administration, but the comeback, which is pretty powerful from the Trump campaign, is you were pretty integral to the to the Biden administration for the last 3.5 years. And if there was something that you really wanted to do, why didn't you do it? Um, well, the president is in charge of foreign policy in America. That's very clear. And Biden was personally very strongly committed to Israel and to the success of the war against Hamas. So Harris has not had a great say over that, I would say. She's tried to communicate that rather subtly by just being a bit louder to call for a ceasefire and a bit quicker. But I don't think personally it's cutting through with not just Muslim voters, but of course there are voters of all backgrounds, all demographics on in the Democrat coalition who are unhappy with the administration's the way that it's played Israel, and for example, by simply not withholding weapons and making a stronger case to Israel to to rein in its
Mm.
military aggression.
Kamala Harris has raised an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, she hit the $1 billion mark. But has her sort of momentum that she's been riding for, probably, I would say, since she announced her candidacy, has that sort of slowed down now?
Yeah, I caveat it by saying that I did find enormous enthusiasm among Democrat activists for
Right.
Harris. They were really relieved and excited that she'd taken over from Biden because they're back in the game. And down in the southern and western swing states, we call it the Sun Belt. There are four states which are in play, and Biden was pretty much out of the game. Trump was really ahead until Harris took on the mantle, and now it's pretty even. It looks like Harris is at least got a shot, but I would say Trump still has his nose ahead, generally speaking. Um, and just tell me what your question was again, because I know it
Oh
was
no,
about.
it was about whether her momentum has evaporated,
Oh
but
yeah,
that's
so
fine.
I think well, first of all, the polling is showing that her momentum has stalled. She definitely had a honeymoon period. She recovered the ground that Biden had lost in his final weeks to be competitive. But and this is reflected on the ground as well. Actually, uh, the enthusiasm only goes so far. It's not permeating out into the what you might call latent Democrat voters who in a big year with a candidate they really are enthused about might get out and vote. That they've been uh, I think they've been put off by the fact that the administration hasn't been better, especially on prices. I know that Trump's campaigning heavily on the border and on immigration and migrant crime, but what I think is really depressing the potential Democrat vote is that prices have gone up so much. The figure that's quoted on the ground in Georgia is the cumulative inflation since 2021 is around 22% on average across your
Mm.
grocery bills, and that's a lot.
Yeah, it's an awful lot. David, early voting, as you mentioned before, has already started. It's the first 3 days I think we've seen. Um, what does that tell us? There's been a record turnout. So what does that tell us about, if anything, what the results will look like?
So yeah, here's another counter indicator. I'm telling you that I'm picking up. I think Trump has got his nose ahead. However, early voting traditionally favors the Democrats, and there's been a record turnout the first 3 days. It's surprised the election officials. Uh, Around 850,000 votes in the first 3 days, and bearing in mind that the total vote last time was 5 million, with everybody postal voting, early voting, and on the day voting. I mean, that's really a stunning early figure. I did go to a polling station on the first day, which was Tuesday, in one of the swing counties, in a town called Lawrenceville, which was in Gwinnett County, up in the northeast suburbs. And I actually found quite a mixed picture, and I would say it was very Georgia because every black person I spoke to had voted for Harris, and most of the white people I spoke to had voted for Trump. Not all of them. I did speak to a white woman who was very anti-Trump and have voted for Harris. But it's it's a diverse county up there. It's a diverse picture. It's like one third white, one third black. Then there's a lot of Hispanic voters, but also quite a few Asian Americans as well. So it's really diverse. And Biden really put on the votes there. He won it by a margin of 75,000 votes, and that's way more than the decisive margin in the whole of the state, of course, and it was way more than Hillary Clinton got. So this is the kind of area that he needs to be really running up the votes, and the Democrats will be heartened that there's a lot of early voting. But as I found when I began to speak to people, that's perhaps not the whole story.